And I hit record.
You love having all the power of the podcast. I'm going to start hosting these Q&As so that I can have the power and you know what it feels like to sit on this side.
I have the power.
But
Even
the power of dialogue. Oh, this is going to be a fun episode.
Oh, we're just ramping up. What the listener doesn't know is that I've already told you 2 wild stories that lasted 20 minutes. And we hadn't even hit record yet. Yeah. I was on the phone with Corey today. You know who Corey is, but the listener.
Of course I know who
Corey's
Corey
my friend.
is.
Yeah, and Corey and I were like, I was taking a break. I was taking a walk at work, so I just called him to chat. And I was telling him about something. And he's like, your phone calls are never dull. I told him, I was like, well, if I don't have a story to tell you, I just make something up.
I mean, that really is the problem with being friends with a fiction writer or my spouse. You never know whether the stories are going to be true or not.
Oh, man. Jason gets me every time. Okay.
Well, but to be fair, you are super easy to get.
Oh, I'm so good.
I could tell you a story about the fact that my neighbor is an alien, and you'd be like, really? How'd you know?
Yeah, I believed for 4 years that La Quinta in Spanish meant next to Denny's. And I avidly believed that. Somebody told me. I was like, what does La Quinta mean? And they were like, next to Denny's. And there was a Denny's next to the La Quinta Hotel. So
there almost always is.
This makes perfect sense. And then every time I see a La Quinta, there's another Denny's. And so I would look at people and be like, La Quinta next to Denny's. And they're like, huh. And I was thinking internally, I know Spanish. Oh.
Yeah, but that's not what it means.
That's right. I still don't know what it means. We all have our, we all have the things that we're good at and the things that we're terrible at. And for me, telling when somebody is lying, I'm really bad at. I just give everybody the benefit of the doubt. I'm like, sounds good to me. Okay, so we need to get started.
Google says La Quinta means the fifth.
Oh.
It seems like okay. Villa. A Spanish term meaning villa. Okay, that makes way more sense.
Yeah, it means the fifth villa. Yeah, the fifth villa.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what it means.
Yeah, it's also a type of hacienda. I guess the H isn't pronounced.
Nice.
Okay, so now that we've offended all of our Spanish-speaking listeners. I'm
so sorry. Please don't be offended by my ignorance. Okay, we're gonna start this is our 2-year anniversary episode.
2-year episode. Happy anniversary.
Happy anniversary. Happy anniversary. Happy anniversary.
I didn't know there was a song.
Happy anniversary. Happy anniversary. Happy.
Sorry, you all need to, if you're listening on the podcast, please tune into YouTube just to see Jeff's dance.
To see Jeff dance. Happy anniversary. No, we gotta be serious, Laura. It's the 2-year anniversary. And
why would we start being serious now? I mean, I feel like anyone who has stuck with us this long just knows that when the two of us are going to be here, it's just going to be nonsense till about minute 45, and then we'll talk about dialogue for like 3 minutes, and then it'll be nonsense again.
Don't worry, Tom. I'll put the minutes in the notes. Tom's like, thank you. I can hear him from Maine right now. No, New Hampshire. I can hear him from New Hampshire. Or is he in Maine? Why don't I know this? I should know this. Never mind. We're not going to talk about it anymore. Hey, Tom, yell at me real loud where you're from.
I just know New England.
New England, yeah. Anyway, okay, so we're answering questions. We're doing Q&A for our 2-year anniversary episode.
Yes.
First Q.
Can we just give a big shout out to the dialoguers in the Slack channel? They really showed up for this Q&A.
Yeah, man, we have some. This is like going to be like a 4-hour episode. Some of these questions.
You all asked a lot of questions, and they aren't just like easy questions either.
Yeah.
I feel like the questions this year are exponentially harder than last year.
They are. And I thought that we were going to get some like fun questions like, what's your favorite dessert? But
I mean,
nobody asked that.
We did in the last episode talk about what kind of cake are we? So I guess they wouldn't. Yeah.
I don't remember that at all.
Yeah. You were a 3-day-old German chocolate cake.
Oh yeah, that makes perfect sense. that tracks. That aligns. Oh, what kind of cake were you?
I was a funfetti cake with vanilla icing because it's like plain and quiet and unexpected on the outside, but you cut into it and it's full of sprinkles.
It's a party in a bag. Yeah. No,
that's right.
Yeah. That's also man, we answered that question really well.
Yep. Sprinkles and glitter. That's what I'm my internal is made of sprinkles and glitter.
People should go back and listen to that episode. Okay,
so that's the end of our episode. Go back and listen to our past episodes.
See you later. 2 years. Woohoo! Okay, no, we gotta be serious. All right. I can't remember the question you told me to ask though about 2 years. So you have to ask it.
Okay, so I would say, well, the first one that you added was like, what are we excited for the upcoming year? But I feel like that should probably be at the end.
That's an ending question. I was going to ask it at the end.
Okay,
you just read the last chapter. Way to go.
I know. Well, I mean, sometimes it's appropriate to read the last chapter first. I used to do that. I used to read the last page of a book before I read the whole rest to see if it was worth it. Now I just read the middle. I just pick a random page. Okay, so my question was, so we've done a lot of working with authors over the last 2 years. What's the one thing that you wish you've had a chance to tell authors over the last 2 years that maybe hasn't come up or?
I have talked a lot over the
last 2 years. I know, me too. That's why it's a hard question.
Oh man. Do you have an answer?
Yeah, I have an answer. I'm not going to ask a question I don't have an answer to.
I know that you cheat like that. All right, go ahead. Ask your answer.
I cheat like that. Usually you're the one who's like, I have 6 questions, but I'm only going to write 5 down and I'm going to surprise you with the 6th one.
No attention to the man behind the curtain. All right, go ahead.
Or, hey, you want to do a Q&A with me in an hour?
I've done that. Yeah.
You've never done it in an hour, but you've done it within 24.
Yeah. Or I've done it with like, hey, tonight you want to do a Q&A? You'll be like, when? I'll be like, I don't know, 8. And you're like, it's 6. I'm like, yeah, 2 hours.
Yeah. And then I'll show up at 8 and then you'll show up at like 8:20 and be like, sorry.
Yeah, sorry, I was late. Yeah. I was late tonight. I was like 2 minutes late tonight.
Yeah. All right. So I'm going to answer the question while you stall and think about your answer.
I was stalling. You know me so well.
All right. So I think the thing that I've said it before, but I think like since this is the anniversary episode, if the one thing that you take away from this podcast today is we talk a lot about diagnosing dialogue, right? Like we use things like words, cadence, body language, pacing, vehicles, engines, anchors, and hazards. And like we have all of these terms that we use. Yeah. What did you say?
Reader burden.
Reader burden, right? Like we have all of these names for all of these tools. And I think sometimes that can be really intimidating, especially for somebody who's listening to the podcast for the first time. Like, what do they mean by cadence? And how is cadence different than pacing? And oh my gosh, I'm never going to learn this. And I can see how really overwhelming it is. But I think the thing that I want people to know is you and I have spent tons and tons and tons of time talking about this, not just on the podcast, but behind the scenes and for your books and for different events and like just kind of thinking and conceptualizing this. So I would say like take the parts that feel right for you as an author and leave the rest on the table. Maybe you come back and you pick it up later. Maybe you don't, but like you don't have to take the dialogue doctor commentary as all or nothing, right? Like take what's good for you as an author and the rest, chalk it up to two crazy people doing a podcast.
A funfetti and stale German chocolate cake doing podcasts together.
Yes, we're gonna have to change the name from the dialogue to two cakes on a shelf.
Two cakes on a shelf. Two cakes on a shelf. Hi, we're here with two cakes on a shelf. No, that was a really good answer, and it's very true. I actually just got an email from a patron, one of the patrons from the dialoguers, this week, that was like, "Hey, can you just like point me to a primer episode?"
Oh,
I was like, "Yes, I can."
do a primer episode.
Yeah, well, I have a string of like 5 of them that I give people. I should probably put that on the website, but like,
Yeah,
it's episodes where we were like, "Hey, this is a thing that we're defining." Like,
Yeah.
there's a Daisy episode, there's a characterization episode, there's a modulation episode, there's a VEAH episode. Like, they're just like, this is an
Mhm.
episode where you and I got on the camera and talked about something very specific. So
So, that would have been a good 2-year anniversary episode, is to pull all of that together into one like brief episode that points them there.
that requires me to edit things.
No, you don't know. We just talk about those episodes and then they can go back and listen to the full episode.
Oh yeah, we should have done that.
Right, like a
Instead, we asked the
summary.
dialoguers for incredibly difficult questions.
Right.
Um,
Instead of talking about stuff we already know, we ask them for the most challenging questions
most
they could
challenging
possibly pose.
yeah. So
Okay, so what's your
my
what's
answer
your answer?
is, I feel like I won't put this on you. I have done a terrible job of actually defining what dialogue is. And I continue to get, and the reason I say that is because I continue to read articles. I read, if there's something that goes up on the internet about dialogue, I tend to read it. Like I'm constantly reading what other people are saying and watching YouTube videos and stuff like that. And if it's, and I realize that like there's like 10 different definitions of what dialogue is out there. And so something I have done poorly is define what dialogue is and then what components make it up. And I've been journaling about it since I've been traveling so much. I've been journaling about it. So, dialogue, I've begun to say dialogue is the exchange of expectations and emotions between two characters. It breaks, the components of it are the vocalization, it's actually in quotes, the tag, if you do not have one, the body language, and anything that is allows emotional conveyance to occur. So that's like the basic components. And then those components if those components for a single character are an utterance. So I realized recently that I say the word utterance all the time. I have a very clear idea of what an utterance is. Other people don't know. 2 utterances make an exchange. A group of exchanges make a segment. And then the people who I coach are like, "Yeah, Jeff, we know." So like every week. But and then segments are dialogue, right? Like, so the dialogue is, because a lot of times, like I was talking to I was over in another community, and they were talking about like this book, and they're like, "Jeff, you're always saying the dialogue is so engaging, but this one author, she doesn't write any dialogue, like her character's mute and there's no dialogue." And so I'm like, "Well, let me go see." I read it. I was like, "Oh, it's full of dialogue. It's just, she doesn't have any vocalizations, but she's like."
Right.
Yeah, so.
There's dialogue. Well, and this is where, going back to, what I was saying is like, you don't have to necessarily know the names or the definitions, like to walk away from the stuff that we do. You don't have to be able to look at a piece and be able to be like, well, that's a segment and that's an utterance and that's right. Like, but this idea that dialogue is a communication between two people, and that communication can be verbal or nonverbal. Like, it's the ideas that we want dialoguers and those who are new to the community, who haven't quite decided that they want to be a dialoguger yet, but they just want to be dialogue adjacent.
They're just hanging out on the podcast.
Right? Like,
and
they
it's
just
okay.
Yeah.
Look, I am cheap and I understand. I can't tell you how many people's before I had actually like the funds to like join Patreons and stuff like that.
Mhm.
I can't tell, for years I was just like stalking everything they put out on the internet.
Well, I don't think it's called stalking when people put it up like for public consumption. I feel like you're just a consumer then. I feel like that's why
I
people
feel like
put content on the
I
internet.
feel like stalking has less to do with where you find the material and more to do with how obsessively you search for it. So when you're like reading things from people that they wrote like 12 years ago,
I mean,
that's stalking.
well, it depends
When
on
you're
where
on
you
Google
find it.
search page number 9, that's stalking.
Okay, yeah. Anything past page 5, you're leaning into.
You're in stalking
Well,
territory.
but it also depends on how much you find on pages 1 through 5,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. By the way, don't tell people you stalk them. They don't like that.
I mean, you can stalk me if you want. I Google search myself regularly.
Do you really? Do you find
I
anything
don't.
fun?
No, but I also just want to make sure that like I'm on brand.
Yeah, that I'm not writing terrible things about you on the internet.
I mean, if anybody wants to write something terrible about me, no press is bad press, right? P.T.
That's
Barnum
not
said
true.
something like that.
That's not true. That was before the internet. Yeah. Who's
That's
this
true.
guy, Elf Jenkins, that keeps writing these mean things about Laura? I have no idea. Yeah. So, all right. Next question.
Okay, here we go.
This one comes from
Drum
Alicia.
roll.
Dialoguer Alicia.
There's a good drum roll.
It was not. All right. How do you plot a novella / novel with the conversations that need to occur per chapter? Do you want me to take this one? I usually do the plotting stuff.
Yeah, I can adjust a plot, but I don't know how to build it from scratch. Which I feel like, based off of the questions that we have here, I feel like we're gonna see a pretty big divide on writing versus editing.
Yeah, that's why you and I make a good team. And I actually tried to order them that way. I was like, okay, because these aren't the order they came in. So I was like, I'm gonna put them in order so that one question will lead to the next, so that we can answer them more efficiently. So I may have a lot up front, and then you may have a lot on the back side.
Yeah.
Yeah. So think of your plot, to answer Alicia's question. Think of your plot as a series of conflicts. You have a major conflict that has to be determined. That is the plot. And that conflict ideally is going to require your character to change in some way. So in order to overcome whatever barrier your character has, whatever challenge your character is facing, your character is going to have to change. So if you're writing a romance, the conflict is, can these two people get together? And they're both going to have to change in some way, or one of them is going to have to change in some way. You know, one of them is too proud and the other one is too prejudiced, and they're going to have to give up their pride and their prejudice in order to meet in the middle where they can find love and romance.
Can you get through one episode without talking about?
Never. Now I'm going to take it as a challenge. Challenge accepted.
Every episode.
Every book I've ever read in this episode.
But it's not every book, it's every episode you talk about Pride and Prejudice.
It is the foundation of romance.
I know, you say it all the time. I think you're just trying to convince me that I should read it.
No, don't. You'll hate it.
Hence the reason I haven't read it. Yeah, anyway, sorry.
Nothing explodes. Nothing explodes. Nobody dies. Don't read it. Okay, so you get your central plot down, right? Like if you're writing a mystery, the central plot is, the central challenge is who did it. And so you think about how your character needs to change in order to solve that conflict. And then think about along the way the steps that need to happen. I am answering the question, I promise. So you got your big chat, you got your big conflict, then you're thinking about like, okay, I need some times where my character is challenged to change and doesn't. I need some times where my character experiments with change and possibly does it wrong. I need to think about some times where like conflicts happen that raise the stakes and make it more dangerous. You line up all of these conflicts. Now, here's the key. Each of those conflicts is a conversation. So think about each conflict as a conversation. Now you have the conversations you need to write in order to take your character from point A to point B. So
excellent answer.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I do think I need to, like, what does that mean that each conflict is a conversation? Well, like, let's go back to romance, right? Like, okay, Harry and Sally, because I'm just going to keep pulling all of the references that I usually pull. I'm actually in the back of my brain, I'm like trying to gather them all.
I know.
I'm like,
I know. I can see you. And you know what? You're not even going to pick the ones that like I can enjoy with you. You're going to pick all the ones that I'm like,
all the ones you don't know. All the ones
I'm
that you're
not
like,
going to watch that.
Oh, why are you bringing this up again? Why are you talking about You've Got Mail again? So You've Got Mail.
I actually think I might have seen that one when it actually first came out.
Yeah. I mean, how could you not?
Or maybe I saw Sleepless in Seattle. I feel like it was the same movie.
They're the same.
Yeah.
So You've Got Mail, right? Like Meg Ryan is living in her mother's shadow, and she, in order to find love, she needs to let go of trying to be her mother and discover who she actually is, right? Like that's her arc in the romance. So we know that we need some scenes of her failing to live in her mother's shadow. So instead of thinking like, okay, I'm gonna have a scene where she's sitting at the cash register by herself, counting money, make it a conversation, I'm gonna put her in a bookstore that she owns, where her employees are arguing about, are we going to get any customers today or not, right? Like, so line up your challenges to your character and then try to conceive each challenge as a conversation. The weird part of Alicia's question is per chapter, right? Conversations that need to occur per chapter. I don't actually think in chapters. So I just think in beats of the story and then kind of divide chapters based on how long a beat took me. Usually, actually, I'm just like,
you just write until your editor says, all 7 of these paragraphs do not need to go in your book.
There is no conflict here in these 2 characters discussing which lunch place is the best lunch place. This is not a conflict that has anything to do with your book. Yeah.
All right. So from an editing standpoint, after you've got your plot outlined and you are thinking about what needs to stay, what needs to go, and what are you missing, you need to think about the emotions that your reader is going to feel after each conversation or at the end or during each chapter. And you want to think about, are you taking them on a roller coaster? Sometimes we think, especially like if you go back to elementary school and they talk to you about how to plot a story, and it's this big, huge mountain, right? And you're just going up the mountain and 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 up the mountain. And then you're at the top of the mountain and then you get to go down just a little bit and then you're done, right? Like that's how we think about story. But that's not how readers want to go on an emotional journey. We don't want to climb a mountain because climbing a mountain is hard. We want to go on a roller coaster because roller coasters are fun. We get that first big up where it's like a lot of excitement and a lot of anxiety. And are we going to like this? Are we going to hate this? Is this going to be good? Right? Like that's what you want your reader to feel in the first chapter. Like, I'm so excited to take this on, but I'm actually kind of terrified that this is going to suck, right? You get to the top, you peak their emotion, and then you drop them. Right? You want their emotion to go down, and then you're going to build it back up and you're going to lower it and you're going to go up and down because it's those emotional highs and those like reprieves that keep your reader turning the page. You can't let them get too low though. Like if they get too far down, like don't take them on that roller coaster that goes underwater because then they're lower than when they started and that's not good. You got to keep them up high, right? Like keep your readers up. So if you resolve some of the conflict, don't take, and this is where I often cut the ends of Jeff's chapters, because as a writer, Jeff wants to resolve those feelings he brings out in the conversation so that he can go on with the rest of his day. So he gets the reader really emotionally high, and then he works it all the way back down to their starting point. But as a reader, if you take me all the way back to my baseline and I'm calm and I'm relaxed again and everything's been resolved, I'm not going to turn the page. I'm going to be like, oh, all right, this is good. Let me walk away. So cut it and keep, so up and down and up and down and up and down. So that's how you make sure that like your book is engaging. But then the question becomes like, how do you get rid of chapters that you don't need? Like we said, anything that takes you too low, anything that's not keeping you on a roller coaster. If you have too many that are going straight up, sometimes you need to pull one that brings you down a little bit, not always, depending on genre. Like thriller, when you get to that part that was in the top of the mountain in your elementary school, those you can have 2 or 3 in a row that just keep building, but you know, in general, up and down. But then there's always the question of like, well, how do I know what I'm missing? And this is where reader burden comes in. Anytime your reader has a like, well, why is that happening moment? I don't understand what's going on here. What are they thinking about? Why this guy? Why that? Why is this person a suspect? Why are they here, right? Like any of those things, those are places where you can add a new chapter to explain. And it doesn't always have to be a chapter, it can just be part, but that's where you have to really think about what to add and what to take away as an editor.
Yeah, that's I love that description. To add to it, I would say, as you think about that emotional journey, this is really where what you're describing, Laura, is really where genre conventions come in. So a lot of times, genre conventions are a way to replicate an emotional journey that particular readers like. Romance readers don't like the genre conventions. Romance readers like how the genre conventions make them feel when they read the story. Thriller readers don't like genre conventions. In fact, if they catch you using them, they start to get a little frustrated. What they like is how those genre conventions make them feel. So be empowered, because I know if you're like me and you hear like, oh, you got to write to market. You got to figure out what's selling. You got to learn the conventions of that genre. You got to read 100 books in that genre and learn the conventions. And then you have to just write those conventions and you sell. If you want more freedom there, you can back up philosophically. And yes, you do have to learn those conventions if you want to sell to those readers. But what those readers are actually looking for is a specific emotional journey. It gives you a little more freedom to create and play when you can back up and think about what the journey actually is that you're taking the reader on. It also helps you know, like when you master what a reader wants in a specific genre reader, what emotional journey they want. If you can master that, then you have the ability to play with them. And you have the ability to surprise them in ways that they're going to enjoy being surprised, because right when they think things are going to get better, you take one more dip and then you make it better. And that, you know, creates a sense of surprised expectations that they may like. And I also just need to add, when we say up and down, that does not mean happy and sad.
Good clarification there.
If you're writing horror, up means scary and down means relief. If you're writing thriller, up means the stakes get raised and down. So up and down are just general loose terms, to describe whatever emotions you're trying to evoke. And the truth is, like, if you think about your story as a 3-dimensional emotional journey, you have a lot of different feelings you can play with for a reader. It's not up and down, it's actually up, down, left, right, you know, inverted, I don't know, whatever this is, north, south,
3D
east,
chess.
west. Yeah, 3D chess, which I am bad at.
Now you're bringing in our day job.
You
always talk about 3D chess.
3D chess, nonlinear.
Yeah.
So
you're right.
It 3-dimensional crossword puzzle.
It is a whole spectrum of what the emotion is. The roller coaster should be the level of intensity of a feeling, not necessarily the feeling itself.
Yeah. Question number 2.
Question number 2.
This one I think is I actually put this one in here for you because I was like, oh, this is a home run Laura question.
Oh, for me? Uh-oh.
How do you
That's no pressure or anything.
No pressure. How do you set up a cast of characters for conflict and entertaining dialogue?
Oh, this is a hard question.
That's why I gave it for you. That's why I gave it to you.
Right. So I'm going to knock it out of the
Yeah.
park because it's so
Yeah,
hard.
yeah.
Okay.
And then I can be like, look at how smart I am for sitting next to Laura. The definition of Jeff's career.
Wait. How smart you are for sitting next to me. Does that mean that because I'm going to give a bad answer, you're going to look smarter?
No. I mean that like you give great answers and then I nod and I'm like, yeah, see what we did? See what we did here?
Got it.
Yeah.
All right. So setting up a cast of characters is all about opposites. If you have all of your characters who are the same, even if they're all the same, like in level of strength, that while the conflict can be big, it's just not entertaining. So you need characters who are vocal and characters who are quiet. You need characters who are very thoughtful and characters who are very thoughtless. And when you're creating your cast, you want to figure out who your main character is, which in the dialogue community, we call it the vehicle character because it's the one who's driving the emotions of your reader. So you're going to figure out who that character is and what their voice is going to sound like. Now, sometimes you're going to decide on the voice first and then back it into personality and into backstory. Sometimes you're going to start with your backstory and work your way into voice. Sometimes you're going to start with your personality and work one background and voice. It doesn't matter how you come to the story, but you have to really kind of know those 3 things about your character when they start and when they end the story. Once you've created your main character, you're going to pick and choose your antagonist, which I guess we call the anchor character.
Yeah, it doesn't. Yeah.
I'm not so good with these acronyms. You throwing acronyms.
Go back to that first question. Things that Jeff should have explained to Laura better before he watched them. All right. I was going to tease you earlier about the word vehicle because I remember you were like, I told you, I sent you an email about it.
Not to use it.
And I was like, too late. I already did. And you're like, don't call characters vehicles. You don't ride a character.
They can be the driver.
Nope.
They're vehicles. Vehicles, engines, anchors. I don't know what car has an anchor.
That's right.
I guess a boat is technically a vehicle. They can have an anchor.
That's right.
I don't know. Apparently we're pirates now. I don't know.
Arr.
Okay. So anyway, so you're going to pick what is traditionally known as the antagonist, the one who is going to drive the protagonist or the vehicle character to their worst self. And you want to find the things that are similar about them first, but then you have to explore where they're different. Because whether they come in contact with each other at the beginning of the story or at the end of the story doesn't matter. Eventually, they're going to have to come against each other. And it needs to be a fair fight. Nobody likes an unfair fight. Okay, so that's how you build your conflict and your antagonist. But then when you're building characters around your protagonist and your antagonist, you still need to make sure that you have characters that are going to elevate the voice of your protagonist and your antagonist. You need somebody to make them shine. If they are funny, you need somebody to like set them up so that there's a place for a one-line joke. If they are, if they're Walt Longmire, I can do it too, Jeff.
Yeah, I love Longmire.
Right, but I always talk about Longmire, right?
I know.
If you're gonna pull out your favorites, I'm gonna pull out mine. So we will be talking about Justified a lot
A
today.
lot.
Well, and there's a good example as well, right? Like the protagonist and the antagonist, they have very similar strengths, but they're also very different. Anyway, but Walt Longmire barely talks at all. So they had to give them a cast of characters who are very vocal so that he can nod and grunt and point and shrug, and it feels like an actual conversation.
Yeah,
So
you got to put Lou Diamond Phillips in there behind the bar to speak
right.
to lecture in paragraphs at a time.
Yes. Do
Yeah.
you know what Jason and I call Lou Diamond Phillips?
No,
We call him Ludafi.
I actually didn't know that. I didn't know that. So funny, Ludafi.
I mean, Lou Diamond Phillips is a lot to say as often as we talk about him, so we had to shorten it.
That makes sense. That makes sense. And Ludafi, I feel like, is an honorary nickname. That's
It is.
Yeah.
It's like J-Lo, right?
It is. Yeah.
Yeah. I love it.
Yeah.
He probably wouldn't, Mr. Phillips, if you are listening to this podcast.
Oh my gosh, Ludafi, if you're listening to this podcast, come on and fight us about your nickname. We will fight you. Come on the podcast. Okay. So we will fight on the fight. Come on, we will fight.
All right. So question 3 is for you, right?
Yeah. Well, question 3 is just you actually already answered question 3, so I'm just going to add to it a little bit.
Did I?
Yeah,
well,
you did.
Can I read it?
Yeah.
Okay. So the question 2 came from Faye. So thank you, Faye.
Yay, Faye!
Eric asks question 3.
Wait. You know what's cool about Faye's name is that not only is it a cool name, like the Fae are also magical beings. So Faye, in essence, is a magical being. You're welcome, Faye. All right, go
ahead. Okay. Eric asks, how do you use the Legos to build the protagonist and the related blocks to build the antagonist and supporting characters?
So you were just talking about build. So when he says Legos, this is a ongoing project that has not come out yet. And the reason it hasn't come out yet is because right now it's really difficult to use. And I've been playing with different ways to make it easier to use.
You know why it's difficult to use? Because we should have built action figures first.
Okay. So
I mean, it's the anniversary episode. I feel like we have to bring out everything that happened.
Every fight we've ever had
over the last year.
You're a daisy if you do, Laura.
I'm your Huckleberry.
I'm your Huckleberry. All right. So, oh man. Speaking of Tombstone, no, Legos. So the Legos are this project where I was like laying out different qualities that we're constantly using when we do. Laura and I do these sessions where people bring us their cast and we help them like pull their character voices out through talking about their words, cadence, body language, and pacing based on their character's personality and background, right? Like, so we look at background, we look at personality, and we're like, okay, how does this get expressed in the book through a character voice? And Legos were the idea of like, okay, we're just going to take some components of character voice that we're using all the time, and we're going to say like, okay, if you have an impatient character, here are the words, cadence, casing, body language for an impatient character, and then like if you have an egotistical character, here's some options for that, and then you could have like an egotistical impatient character, and you can like use them to build your action figure. So, but the spreadsheet is a little unwieldy right now, so I'm trying to figure out how to better put that together. That's why we haven't put it out yet. It's coming. Okay, so that's what the Legos part of that question is.
To be fair, you have been traveling a lot and really haven't had a chance to work.
Man, I had COVID. My mother-in-law died. So
you've had a rough.
Everybody, it's been a rough couple months. Why is Jeff so punchy on the podcast? He's lost his mind. So that's the Lego portion of the question. The Lego is like, so Laura just answered like what you're looking for through conflict and opposites. What I'm going to add is that ideally, in an ideal world, when you're looking for that opposite and that conflict, to go back to the question Alicia asks, see, I told you I arranged these on purpose, about the lining up your conversations. If you know the conflict that your vehicle character is going to have to go through, the change your vehicle is going to have to go through, then you want to start putting voices around them that is going to push them to make that change. So if you have a shy character who's going to have to find their voice through the story, you want to start putting characters that are going to demand that character speak, right? You want aggressive characters, maybe a manipulative character, maybe a character that is very selfish, that's like trying to get something from your shy character. You start putting those characters in, and now you have conversations that are naturally going to force your shy character out of their shell, right? Like, so if you can start thinking about what Laura was saying, where you're like looking for opposites in order to push your character to line it up. If you have your plot arc, you have your major conflict and how your character is going to grow, how your character needs to grow to overcome that conflict, then starting to look for those opposites in ways that are going to push that character growth for your anchors and for your engines that are going to encourage that character growth. So like for your engine characters, the characters that serve as like, that encourage positive growth from your hero, your protagonist, your vehicle, to use all the terms. So the engine, you want them to have some, like we've talked about in the past, how engines need to complement your hero character. They need to set the example. Like, hey, this is what it looks like, shy character, to come out of your shell. So the shy character has somebody who's encouraging them forward. But yeah, so that's, man, I just threw a ton of, just speaking of things that we should have described better, all the terminology.
So if you want to learn more about building character voices and the relationships between protagonist and antagonist, or the vehicles, engines, anchors, and hazards, the mini course that we do on character voice, I think we have one in October.
September. It's
September?
late September. Yeah, we have one coming up in late September.
Okay, yeah, so that's the one that you want to do, because it's where we really break down the idea of the 4 components of voice and how to use them strategically to create a cast of characters.
Yeah, and if you see me tying myself on knots in this, like trying to answer this question in like 15 minutes, it's because those 3 questions from Alicia, Faye, and Eric, we take 4.5 hours to answer. So that's why you see me like. We
have an add-on for some people to go over your cast of characters with us. So to make it really specific to you.
So that's coming. You know what? It may be in October. It's either late September or early October. I don't remember.
It's in the fall. We'll just say it's in the fall.
It's in the fall. It's in the fall when the leaves are green.
I think you can sign up for it on.
According to you, like you've got. No, I took the sign up down because it's getting confusing. I haven't put it up yet. I need to put it up.
Okay.
I'll put it up soon.
Or you can send us an email or put it in Slack that you're interesting. Yeah. You did have COVID.
It did. Okay, question number 4. This one I think is just for both of us because it's just a feeling question. How do you feel about head hopping in a book?
And this one's from Sully.
From Sully.
So what do you think he means by head hopping?
Oh, I know what he means. He means there's 5 different points of views. Or 3 different points of views, and you're jumping from point of view to point of view. So like the book club book that we both just read. I'm just kidding. I didn't read it.
I tapped out. I didn't read it.
That episode's coming up in a couple weeks after this one. And it is mentioned that you weren't there to fight with Tom. Of course, I actually think in this one, you and Tom would have been completely united, as I seem to be the one, oddly, in this one that was like, no, I really liked it. And everybody else was like, so they like aspects of it. Anyway.
Sorry, Tom, I wasn't there to fight with you.
That's right. So, yeah, head hopping. So in that book, for example, you start off in the head of the lead monk, what you think is the lead character, and then you get to part 2, and all of a sudden you're in the head of the like opposition army. General, and then like you actually end up getting in the head of the love interest in a couple chapters, and then you see another one. And what that book does, just to talk about something really positive for She Who Became the Sun, what that book does beautifully is, see, I've already forgot the lead character's name, Zhao, I think it is. Zhao, the one of the vehicle characters, is biologically female, living as a male in ancient China. Initially for his self-protection, and then later for because he has an identity discovery. So that transition, what head hopping allows is this really interesting thing where Zhao's pronouns change based on whose head you're in. So if you're in the head of somebody who knows that Zhao is biologically female, the character is she. When you're in the head of somebody who doesn't know, the character is he. It's like, that's the kind of thing head hopping. Famously, Percy Jackson novels head hop a lot, especially the latter novels, where you've got like literally at the top of the page, it'll say like Annabeth, and now you're in like Annabeth's head. And it's like Grover, and then you're in Grover's head. Yeah, that's head hopping.
All right, that's what
How do you feel about head hopping?
I meant. So, as with many things, it depends.
You have no opinion.
No opinion. No, I have a very.
Mug? I have a mug that says the answer is it depends.
It depends. Yes, right. So, okay. So if head hopping is done well, I love it. And I'm always so excited by a story that head hops. Whether it's told in first person or third person doesn't matter. The perspective change, when done correctly, is amazing. And while I'm not a huge fan of George R.R. Martin, he does this phenomenally well. Like, you are so in somebody's story that when it changes chapters, it feels crushing to have to move on, right? He does it really well.
Yeah.
When it's not done well, it is very distracting and disorienting as a reader. So I would say, like, because this is a podcast about dialogue and blah, blah, blah. If you can't find your characters' voices and you can't figure out how their perspective sees an event differently than other characters, stick with one point of view. If you really have the voice and can get into the head of the different characters, it can be an amazing experience for your reader.
Yeah. I 100% agree with what you said. And I will just add that I think really good head hopping, in addition to having unique character voices, also has unique emotional journeys. So if you're going to give me more than one vehicle to drive in, you're putting me on more than one emotional journey. And I have to, so like, you have to take me, like, each time you put me in a different head, that character, I'm expecting growth and change from that character. So you can't just jump heads because it makes your plot writing easier.
Yeah.
If you put me in a different head, know that you are taking on a character journey that I now am expecting to go on. And if you can weave all of those together, all of those character journeys together in growth and in, like you were saying, like in unique character voices, and take each character on a journey, then head hop all day. But if you have one character journey and you're head hopping because you need to have a scene where that character doesn't show up in.
Martha Wells did that.
Yeah,
when she created Bot 2, and we talked about it in the podcast, like, how do you feel about that? Right? And she made it work, and it was an interesting way to create that gap, but it did feel very divisive as a reader because there wasn't as much of that emotional journey.
Yeah, well, you just feel put upon. You feel like, oh, I have to do something else here
Yeah.
I have to get, and the reader feels that, like, weight of like, this is getting complicated.
Yeah. I also think that when you introduce and how often you use these characters can really change the reader's experience. So like in Martha Wells' book, it didn't show up until like 2/3 of the way, maybe even 3/4 of the way through the book.
Yeah.
And that's a very different experience than a book that starts one and then another and one and then another. Or even a book that's like told mainly from the perspective of the like the detective, but then it's punctuated like every 4th or 5th chapter with a chapter from the perspective of the killer or the thief or whatever, right?
Yeah.
Like, because it's planned out strategically, it feels much more acceptable as a reader than if all of a sudden 3/4 of the way through we're changing perspective.
Yeah. Well, to talk about like where it's like you reference Game of Thrones where it's done well, just taking like, there's so many perspectives in that book, but just taking like the Stark children, like Jon Snow, Sansa, Robb, Anya, Bran, and poor Rickon, who just gets thrown out to the west. There's a boy running in the west with big wolves. What's he doing? Don't worry about it. Don't worry about it. Anyway, but all of those, the characters that we get in their head and we see, they all have unique voices. They have unique journeys. They have unique emotional, like compelling rides that we're on, right? Like Bran's ride is very different than Sansa's ride, is very different than Arya's ride. Like, yeah, they're all just very, so that's one of those ones that like, I really feel like does it, like he does it really, really well. And to like you were saying, like you get so engaged in Arya's, I know for me, it was Arya's story in the books, that when he leaves her head and he goes somewhere else, I'm like, wait, can I just skip to the next Arya chapter? Like,
I actually did that. I
really?
read the whole second book, only Arya's story and no one else's.
Oh, wow.
Because I was, well, that's not true. I got about 1/4 of the way through, and then I was like, I don't care about anybody else, so I just read her story.
I did skip. I will say when I was reading, I would skip the Sansa chapters because I did not connect to her journey.
No.
I loved Robb and I loved Jon Snow and I loved Arya, but I did not connect to Sansa. And I didn't care about Bran in the later
Yeah.
books. I was like, you're like in the north with elves. I don't know. Yeah. Anyway. Okay, next question.
All right.
I feel like we've beaten that one to death.
Yeah, and we're an hour in, and
are we really?
Yeah.
Oh man, I told you this was going to be like
this.
A 4-hour.
This is a marathon episode.
Dialoguers, you did this to yourselves. All right, Eric's question. This one's going to be short, so I'm just going to hit it. Okay. His is a vehicle, engine, anchor, hazard question. How do you use VEAH to analyze a scene from a book or a movie? And can characters change from engines to anchors or hazards from scene to scene, depending on the situation of that character trait? So the reason we came up with vehicle, engine, anchor, and hazard is to talk about how the characters relate to each other. Specifically, how the characters relate to your hero / anti-hero / protagonist / whoever that lead character is that you're following, right? We needed a way to talk about how these characters relate to that lead character's emotional journey. So that's why we came up with these terms. So how do you analyze a scene? You look at the lead character and you look at your vehicle and you ask, what's this character doing? Is the engine helping character growth or hurting character growth? Or are they causing the character to swerve? So like, I just started watching a show that, man, I am absolutely in love with, called The Bear, about a restaurant that's being filmed. And there's a character, Richard, in there, who is the best illustration of a hazard that I've ever seen. Because every time he comes on the screen, he is creating chaos, creating utter chaos. And that seems to be his only role in the cast, right? Like, now sometimes he's also an anchor, sometimes he's an engine, but his primary role when he shows up in a scene is to just force the other characters to react and respond. Anyway, and their anchors and engines are very clear in that. I'm mentioning that one because if you want to watch a show where you're like, oh man, there is one lead character, well, two lead characters, two
Mainly
vehicle
one.
characters, mainly one, but the sous chef is also a vehicle character.
Yeah, I would say she's an engine. I would say she's an engine, not a vehicle.
Yeah, I did until she started getting her own. We started seeing her backstory in like episode 4.
Yeah, but they only did that because they wanted her to be likable.
Yeah, and I did like her.
I did too. Yeah, it was good. And the thing about The Bear is that it's only 8 episodes and they're only 22 minutes each. So you can literally binge
you can plow through
in like less than 3 hours.
Yeah, but there's very clear engines who are encouraging positive growth in the lead character, very clear anchors who are encouraging negative growth in the lead character, and then very clear hazards. But all that to say, whether a character is an engine, anchor, or hazard, this isn't like a strict thing. It's not like, okay, you're an engine, you have to always be an engine. This is a tool for you to use to diagnose how you're using your characters. That's what it's just a tool. So there's no like right or wrong way to use it. Use it however it works for you. We created the language in order to just be able to talk about how characters relate and connect to each other. I will say in head hopping, like, you know, if you've got 2 vehicles, a character might be an engine to one and an anchor to another, right? Like depending on their emotional journey. So yeah.
Well, and if you have 2 vehicle characters in a scene together,
their engines are anchors to each other, right? Like, it's just a way to talk about how the characters relate to one another. So it really depends on whose head you're in, who you're trying to figure out. But yeah, it's just a tool to use to describe how characters connect. Yeah.
Good question, though. All right. Question 6 from Shane. Yeah. If a scene necessitates a character being alone, how can you structure the interplay between the character's thoughts, emotions, body language, and interactions with the setting to create the illusion of dialogue?
Do you want me to take this one?
I mean, you can take it or I can talk about how I edit a scene like this.
So let me talk about how to write it and then you can talk about it.
Because writing usually comes before editing.
Sometimes. So sorry, I'm gathering all of the other questions we talked about, trying to find like bits of information in my head about how to cut this answer shorter. So we're talking about your scene is a conflict, and that conflict is a conversation. And we've said dialogue is the exchange of emotions and expectations between characters. So when you're trying to create the illusion of dialogue, what you're doing is you're taking the physical objects around the one character and you are, creating the illusion of the exchange of emotions and expectations between the character and those inanimate objects, anthropomorphizing those objects in some ways in order to generate that exchange. So I got tied up in my own words.
I was going to say,
in my defense, you started highlighting things and bolding things in the document.
I didn't think you were looking.
And I was like, wait, what is happening?
No,
So let me sum up. So I was like, what is going on my page? Things are getting bolded and highlighted. I don't understand. Is she trying to communicate to me something?
No, if I wanted to communicate something, I'd communicate it.
I know, you'd just be like, okay, I'm gonna, so anyway, so what you're doing is creating that illusion of exchange. So you can create that illusion of exchange, like Shane, for example, in an episode that he and I did together, we talked about using the moon and actually having his character have conversations with the moon. It doesn't have to be that direct, right? Like the character can fiddle with something to demonstrate anxiety. The character can feel like something is in his way and like try to push it and not be able to move it, right? Like there's you're open to anything, but the key is that like what your character's body language is, the actions that you're using in this scene where they're alone needs to be interacting with the things around them in order to illustrate their exchange of emotions and expectations. Yeah, that's my very clear and concise answer.
Excellent answer.
Were you going to talk about editing one of those scenes?
I can. Yeah, I don't know. You kind of set it up kind of perfectly to write it. So
Right,
when
let's
you
move
write
on.
that, when you write that perfectly, you don't need to edit.
Amen.
No,
All right, question number 7. We're an hour in. We got to keep moving here.
Okay.
He didn't ask how to edit it. All right,
All right.
Tom. Should have asked how to edit it, Shane. You would have gotten a double answer. Tom asks,
So
there's a
actually,
scene.
the reason I'm not answering it is because the answer is going to be in this question, which is
I-
why
it's-
I was highlighting it while
I
you
got
were
it.
talking.
I got it midway through.
Yeah.
So there's a scene from Say Anything. I was actually going to play the scene, but I guess I don't need to do that. And I'll probably screw that up technically. So I'll just describe the scene. There's a scene from the movie Say Anything that Tom is referencing. In this scene, John Cusack is sitting at his girlfriend's dinner table. It's actually not his girlfriend, but that's complicated. He's sitting at the dinner table with the girl that he likes. And her parents are there and her brother is there. And I think her grandmother is there too.
I've
And-
never seen it.
Oh, it's amazing. It's an amazing
You
show.
say that all the time,
It's so
but
good.
I
It's a
actually hate
classic.
John Cusack.
I know, which is terrible because I connect to him on a deep level.
I know.
I love him so much. High Fidelity. Oh man.
Okay, so
Sorry.
Cusack and some of the other characters, because you're just going to keep talking about how much.
I'll get to the point. I'll get to the point. So Cusack gets asked by the father, "What are you going to do with your life?" And he gives off this rambling answer about, which is like the perfect high school student answer about like, I'm thinking of trying kickboxing and like all of these different things. But the point of the answer is like, I really just want to hang out with your daughter until she goes to college. And so like, he gives this weird rambling answer of like all these big dreams that he has that clearly none of them are going to happen. And at the end, he's like, but because none of that's going to happen right now, I'm going to hang out with your daughter. While he's giving this answer, the camera keeps panning around to the members of the table, making these like shocked, stunned. The father keeps laughing at like the answers because they're so stupid. Like, but it's a very sweet scene. So it's just a very compelling scene where one character is monologuing and everyone else is responding verbally. Tom's question is, it seems much easier to do this on film. What are tips for getting this kind of nonverbal info into the scene without clogging it up or bogging it down? Now I see why you bolded that section.
Now, do you see?
I
Because you
do.
didn't really need the whole Say Anything preview.
I mean, you
But
do.
you
need
love
to say
Cusack.
anything.
You connect with him on a
need
deep
it.
level.
You need it.
it.
You
Oh,
gross point blank. Come on, John. Anyway, go ahead.
no. Oh God, no.
Are you going to answer this question?
Yeah. Well, if you stop talking about how much you love Cusack.
Oh man.
Okay, so
American Sweethearts,
the easiest
Cusack
answer,
and Julia Roberts. Come on, give me 5 more of those.
even Julia Roberts couldn't make Cusack good.
What? No, he was amazing. Billy Crystal, yes, more of this. All right. Catherine Zeta-Jones being horrible. Why didn't we get 5 of these? All right, go ahead.
Are you sure?
Mhm.
I know you have another one that you want to talk about.
Nope, I'm holding it in. I'm behaving myself.
Okay. All right. So the answer is every time the camera moves, you should move with it. So if you're building a scene like this where someone is monologuing, if you just keep them all in one big paragraph, it's not going to be interesting for your reader. You need that interaction. So think about it when in a movie you'd cut to a different character to see their emotional reaction. You just use body language, the nonverbal there. Then you flip back the camera to the person who's talking. They say a line, then you move off of them and you show a different character. It allows you to keep all the people in the scene at the table without anybody disappearing. The reason that I wanted to talk about that in relation to the character who is by themselves, you can do the same thing with action and dialogue. So if a person is alone, where you would typically cut camera to show the scene that they're in, or in the case where you were editing someone and you were using the moon, where the camera would point to the moon, that's when you would have the interruption of the dialogue when the person is by themselves. Yeah. So it's just, if you're envisioning your story the way it's being told on the screen, you're just going to move back and forth between the characters. Now, this only works if you're using television and not, or a movie, not if you're looking at a play. Because how often in a play do you have one person dialoguing and everybody else in the background is just going about their business and they don't speak for an entire song or 9 in some cases, right? Like, so you want to think about this, and never a Fox television show where it's just the one person and they continue to zoom in and zoom in and zoom in until you just see this much of someone's face. Exactly. Right. Not that when Fox should move away from that person to show somebody else in the scene,
double down,
and they zoom in instead, that's when you want to do this. And it as a writer, it can feel cloggy or bogging it down, but as a reader, that switch of emotional perspective helps us understand how we're supposed to be responding to the character who is talking.
Yeah, and the key to finding those moments, I find, is knowing your character's voice. So in that scene, Cusack has a very distinct high school dreamer voice. It's very distinct. And so they're interrupting his, if you just listen to it without watching it, you can hear where you're going to cut away to somebody's facial expression. You can hear it. Like, just close your eyes and listen to it, and you're like, oh yeah, he pauses at the end of the sentence because that's part of his cadence. He then circles back to something he said because that's part of what he does. He's correcting himself here because that's what he does. And so, like, he's clearly at some points like responding to body language that people are giving him, and that's where you want to be like, okay, that's where I put my body language. So when you're writing it out as a writer, like if you're writing because remember, like, while it feels like a monologue because only one character is vocalizing, it's actually a dialogue. The exchanges are just happening between your character and the nonverbals of the other character. So there actually isn't, it's not a monologue, right? Like, that's the first thing to keep yourself from bogging it down, is to remember that, like, this isn't a monologue. They're exchanging emotions and expectations. But they're doing that exchange non-verbally, which is part of the dialogue. Mm-hmm. So I think that'll help you know, like, how to break it up, is know your character's voice. And then you'll know, like, oh, my character doesn't really speak more than a sentence at a time. So I need my character to just give a sentence and then have somebody give body language back. And my character needs to give another sentence and give body language back. The more you do that, the more awkward it's going to feel because your character is responding to body language. But like, Cusack's character kind of rambles. Because John, amazing, kind of rambles. You know what we need is John and Ludovic. Cusack's character kind of rambles. And that, so you get like 2 to 3 sentences before body language should come in.
They're not even at the same caliber of actor. Ludovic,
you get 2 to 3 sentences before something else comes in. So, but so, like, that would be his character's voice, is that he's getting more words out in his cadence than other people are. And so anyway, that's keeping it from bogging down or clogging it up, making it feel like a natural conversation, is about knowing your character's voice and understanding that it's not a monologue, it's this like exchange back and forth. Yeah.
Yes. In general, monologuing is not fun for a reader.
No, readers hate monologues. They skimmed it.
They're
skimmed
just big paragraphs of
Mhm.
prose with quotation marks on
because
either
you
side.
you stopped exchanging emotions and expectations, which is what
Yep.
the reader's showing up for. That's what
Yep.
the emotional journey is made of, is this like exchange between characters. So when you stop exchanging expectations and emotions between characters, or yes, people are like, what if I write in first person? That's always a question we get. Like, yeah, if you're writing in first person, you're cheating a little bit because your character is speaking directly to the reader. And while it's a one-sided conversation, really great first person books are written in a way that makes the reader feel like they're actually having a conversation with the character.
Yes.
Yeah.
Hence, action works as your other characters,
Yep.
or inanimate objects work as your other
Same way,
characters.
same thing.
Yep. You're breaking it up. Dialogue, action, dialogue, action.
Mhm.
That dialogue doesn't have to be in quotation marks because it can just be first person point of view.
Yeah.
So
anyway, that's
good
our answer.
job.
I don't know if we answered that or not. We kind
I
of,
think we did.
yeah.
I
think
mean,
what
you
we actually
certainly gave
accomplished.
homage to John Cusack.
Yeah, what we accomplished is we both agree on John's greatness. All right, question number 8, Mary. This one's a journey. Currently.
Okay, so let's. Do we have to read the whole question, or can we just get to the question?
We can just get to the question.
Okay, so Mary's question, she gave us a lot of context about what she's writing, and I think it's great. But the question boils down to, is it creating reader burden to change the voice of the supporting characters throughout the story?
Okay, I do want to give a little bit of context to it because I actually think the context lends to a question we get all the time.
Okay.
Which is, Lee Child writes Jack Reacher. Jack Reacher's voice does not modulate. Jack Reacher is always Jack Reacher. He is a steadfast, unchanging character. And usually that question comes to us with the insinuation of, see, my characters don't need to grow because I can write Jack Reacher. So Mary has two characters that are in opposition to each other that sound to me both a little like Reachers. They're both like oaks. They are not moving. They're not, their refusal to change is likely the conflict in the story. So to give a little context, so she's asking, like, can I still create growth by modulating my side characters' voices? I wanted to give a little bit of context.
That's great. That was good context.
Because this applies to Reacher stories too. Because we're always gonna. I write military thrillers, and my characters don't change. All right, go ahead. Take it. I interrupted your answer.
No, you go. You answer it.
No, you answer.
Good. All right, I'll answer it. So, reader burden. You're. See, now I thought you were going to answer it. Reader burden is happens when your reader is thinking about something other than what you want them thinking about.
Mm-hmm.
So if they start thinking about, why is this character's voice changing? Or if they're thinking about, why are these two people having a conversation with one another, right? Like, those are the kinds of questions that create reader burden. A character's voice modulating or changing throughout the course of a story is not disruptive to the reader because we expect people to change in different situations. So the better we are as writers and editors at modulating voices, at changing them across the story, the more in-depth the reader's experience can be, because they're going to go on that journey with the characters, regardless if it's the vehicle character, the engine, the anchor, or the hazard.
Yeah, and just to build on that, the unchanging character is your conflict. So the Reacher character's conflict in every Reacher novel is, will this crisis break Reacher? That's the question of every novel. Will this mystery, will this crisis, will this fight, will this be the one that breaks Reacher? So putting characters around Reacher that are breaking show that, like, yeah, there is possible growth here for me. And Reacher refuses to break, right? Like he'll actually come close to it at times. He'll have moments where he's like in a book where he's like, maybe things need to change, but he always comes back to who he is. And that's his character arc. It's not that he doesn't change in a book, it's that he starts and ends in the same place. And so you have to have characters around him who are modulating their emotions, who are feeling different things all the time, who are terrified, who are horrified by what's going on, who are broken with sadness by their sister being kidnapped and they can't find them, in order to communicate the stakes of the book. If you're not moving your side characters, if you have like an oak as a vehicle, or a protagonist and an antagonist who's refusing to change and modulate, who's refusing to experience emotion, then the only way to communicate that emotion to the reader is by having the side characters feel it. Somebody's got to feel it, or there's nothing happening, right? Like, and that's why I think, like, I've read a bunch of Lee Child books. I think that's why they're so successful, is that he actually modulates character voices really, really well. He's just, his archetype, the journey his readers want to go on is of the unmovable hero who is the champion even in the most dire circumstances. That's the emotional journey his readers are showing up for. And he nails it. Like, he just crushes that journey. And that's why, like, it works so well for military thrillers, because in the military archetype is my training, my ability, my strength help me not get caught up in the emotional panic and terror that everybody else is being caught up in. But you still have to show that panic and terror. Anyway, I answered a question that wasn't there.
I know. You always do. You just answer. You just answer whatever you want to answer.
It's like, whose line is it anyway here? The points don't
Points
matter.
don't matter.
700 points to Laura for figuring out the mystery of Jeff. All right, number 9, Tom.
How to express dialect without looking stupid.
I don't know.
Okay, so the way to express dialect is, one, to approach it with respect.
Oh, fear and trembling, baby. Come into that terrifying. Write that dialect with so much fear.
So respect, education and understanding, and beta readers who are representative of the community.
Yeah. That know they're being used as beta readers for that purpose. Don't give an Irish person a book with an Irish character and just hope that they're going to tell you that you nailed the Irish accent. Let them know what they're reading it for.
Yeah. And I think the other important thing about dialect is, ask yourself, how important is it to the story? If you are writing a story that takes place in Boston and you create a space where everyone is in Boston and you're referencing places that only exist in Boston, do you need every single character to have the Boston accent so they all sound like they're on Katak, right? Yeah. Like, do you need that?
I'm glad you tried it. I was going to try it, and there's no way I was going to do it without looking stupid. So
I can only do it for Car Talk.
You can only say that
Jason
word.
Made me listen to it so many mornings.
Jason was a Car Talk fan. I didn't know that.
He loves it.
I loved Car Talk too.
What he listens.
Don't drive like my brother.
Old episodes.
Oh.
Still, yes. So it's the only part of the Boston accent that I can do. But like, do you really need it to get across to your readers? If you don't, leave it out. If it is an absolute must, fear and trembling, respect, knowledge and understanding, and really great, really honest, really informed beta readers.
And consistency. The way that you really look, like one of the ways you really look stupid with dialect is when it comes and goes. Then it looks like
Kevin Costner in Kevin Costner in everything
Prince
he's done,
Thieves.
but
Yeah.
Prince of Thieves
Yeah.
specifically.
Wait, is he
right?
British or from Kansas? I can't tell. It's coming, it's going. It's coming, it's going. So we're weaving and bobbing.
Also, great
Bobbing and
movie.
weaving.
Awesome.
Love it.
You just have to
Yeah,
you
you
just have to let
know
it
what
go.
you're in with the movie for Kevin. You know what you're in.
Which, oh yeah, I
Yeah,
mean,
you know what you're coming into.
it's
Yeah.
every
And
he's Crash Davis in every movie he's
yeah,
ever been in.
and I will say, and people can fight me on this, Yellowstone is best work. Best work. He was born to play a grumpy cowboy. That is what he was born for.
His entire career has been leading up to it.
I know. This is his
Except
ultimate.
that Yellowstone is the slowest cowboy show I have ever watched. I tried twice, not just once, but twice. People rave about it.
There is a break in a season where they do give up on the slowness and they're like, you know what? We're just going to kill people. And then it starts to get pretty fast. There is I think it's like season 2.5. They're just like, you know what? Yeah. Forget all this drama. We're just killing people. And
but
now
who
people
has
just
time
die.
For 2.5 seasons of nothing.
Well, see, Kevin pulled me in. I was able to listen to Kevin grumble for a season and a half. I was like, this is, and actually I had some weird daddy issues around it because I was like, oh my gosh, this is everything my father wanted in a TV show. Kevin Costner on a ranch, riding horses, being grumpy with guns. This is everything my father ever wanted in a TV. He died, 20 years before it came out. But this was, so I was watching it. I was like, Dad, I love this. Anyway. So yeah. All right.
Last
question. Second to last question.
Oh, Lon. Right, because we added one at the end.
We got another question. Lon, why do I do that high voice sometimes? Speaking of dialect that makes you look stupid. Lon, I don't know if you've covered this, probably not. But how do you convey an unreliable POV character in dialogue? Yeah, we've covered that. Don't answer that. I'm just kidding. I'm teasing you, Lon. With italics, Lon.
We talked about it.
You give the character italics, Lon. That's how you do it.
Oh my gosh. You and your italics. Oh my gosh. Stop hating on italics.
See, I'm teasing Lon because the hating on italics started with him. Oh.
All right. So are you going to answer the question really, or do you want me to answer the question really?
I'm going to answer the question really.
Okay.
No, you answer the question really.
Okay. So
answer the last one. I talked too much about Kevin and John.
Depends.
Kevin, John, and Ludovic? Oh, come on. All right, go ahead.
Okay, so it depends. It depends on why they're unreliable and how you want it to come out in their dialogue. But this is part of taking a character and creating the voice, body language, cadence, and pacing. So if you want a character that's unreliable because what they're saying contradicts itself, then you want to bring it up in the words that they say. And you want them to say one thing at the beginning of a sentence and something different at the end of the sentence. I hate all fruit, but I really love to have apples for breakfast. Right? Like that creates unreliability because they're saying two different things all at one time. You can also do that by having them say something at the beginning of the conversation and something at the end of the conversation. If you want it to be more subtle and the unreliability is more about like wanting the reader to just not quite trust the character, you can do that with cadence and body language to make the character themselves unsure of themselves by creating space before they answer. So the dialogue tag and the body language goes before what they say, or even better, in the middle. So they'll start and they'll be like, well, I think, and then they tug on their ear or look around the room and then give their answer. That space in the middle before they give a direct answer makes them feel unreliable because are they lying? Are they making it up? Do they just not know what's happening? So the long and short is use your voice, words, cadence, body language, and pacing to figure out why they're unreliable and how that translates into aspects of character voice.
Yeah. Two tropes that I've
Mic
seen around that.
drop.
Done. Okay, I won't answer.
No, I'm just kidding.
Two
No, you
tropes
told me
that-
I couldn't answer it, so now you can't answer it
Okay.
because I already answered it. No, I'm just kidding. Go ahead. I'll stop.
Two tropes that I've seen around this used a lot in character voice is you giving the unreliable narrator inner thoughts, and the inner thoughts actively disagreeing with what the exterior vocalization is. So they're literally thinking the opposite of what they're saying all the time, and it causes you to like mistrust it. You're like, but that's part of their character voice, right? Like their inner thought has one voice, and then their exterior vocalization has another, and you can't trust what they're saying because they're constantly contradicting themselves with their own thoughts. The other trope that I've seen a lot recently, I think mostly because of the success of like the Loki character in Marvel, is the trickster character who's just upfront and honest that they are lying. Like that's another, like if you're writing fantasy or sci-fi and you want an unreliable, fun, like trickster narrator, often those narrators are just honest about it. They're like, I am lying to you. I'm not telling you the truth. You cannot trust anything I say. Right? Like that's a very clear, unreliable narrator that I think a lot of people are drifting to because of that success of that like trickster character right now in popular conception. You know. But again, like you're saying, it's character voice, so you get to drop the mic, just walk away by it.
Well, I mean, you already picked it back up.
I did, but then I laid it back down. I was like, hey, Laura, put this here. Nobody else touch it.
At least you didn't mute me like you did earlier.
That was before we came on the call.
I know.
I didn't mute you. I turned my own volume off.
That's true. And then you were like, I can't hear you. What's wrong with your microphone?
I didn't mute you. I silenced my own computer.
So you silenced me. You didn't mute me. You silenced me.
I silenced. Oh, great. Now I'm going to get letters. That's a headline. Jeff silences Laura. Yeah.
If that's a headline, I mean,
how big a narcissist am I that I'm thinking that like things that I do on a podcast are headlines? The New York Times is listening to this right now.
Wouldn't that be awesome? For our 2-year anniversary, the New York Times decides to talk about us.
I'm very concerned by my delusions of grandeur.
And then Goofy, John Cusack, and Kevin Costner might come on our podcast.
Oh, man. You know what I want? I want them to audio narrate my most recent novel. I don't even care what chapters they each read. They can just, the user's choice.
Yep.
Yeah. Okay. Last question. We're entering after. It's terrible drum roll. After this doesn't even sound like a roll. It's just me banging on a table. After this podcast episode airs, we'll be moving into year 3. Laura, what are you excited about exploring more in year 3?
In year 3.
Or new. Maybe not more. New.
Okay. So I am super excited about us thinking about the idea of mini conferences. So we started our conferences as mini conferences, but they weren't really mini. They were like 4.5 hours.
They were a whole Saturday. They were 4.5 hours long.
They were just the whole day.
I guess mini is really a relative word.
Right?
Like they're not a week. All right.
That's true. So, but I'm really excited about taking something and creating a small, quick, deep dive into a really small chunk of something. So the one that I'm
really good at that. We're really good at like keeping it like 10 minutes.
Yes, staying super focused on something really. Yeah, we're so good at that. But something like children's voices, which is something that writers struggle with a lot. And even published writers aren't always good at capturing a kid's voice. So like really taking a deep dive into something like that and exploring, what that could look like. What are tips and tricks for writing? What are tips and tricks for editing? How do we like just get in there? Something that, maybe not everybody has time for 4.5 hours, even if it's spread over, they get the recording and it's spread over a couple of weeks. But maybe somebody has 90 minutes to just be like, yeah, I'm writing a kid's voice. Let me spend 90 minutes with Jeff and Laura as they explore that. So That's what I'm excited about. I think we
Yeah.
talked about that before, and I didn't just surprise you with, hey,
No, we've talked about it a lot. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm very excited about finally writing the book.
Yes.
I have actually started working on again, which is good. I got my novel out, and now that that is out of my brain, I can actually focus on something else. So I'm very excited about that. And now that, I was hitting a big barrier with it, and I couldn't figure out what it was. And then this season of travel and illness and funeral, and like just sitting up at night trying not to think about other things, really helped me realize that the barrier I was stuck in is that I needed to define dialogue. So now that I have a clear conception of like what dialogue is and how we talk about it, I think I've found already the book is much easier to write. There was that missing piece. It was like, oh, I'm finding myself explaining these things over and over and over again. There's something missing here. And now that I have it, I think it's rolling out. So I'm excited about that. I'm also excited about, I am excited about the mini conferences. I'm excited about moving the Lego project forward into action figures, because the goal was to create the Legos and then start creating action figures that you can like look at. So I'm pumped about moving that forward as well. I think that's really going to help people. I am very much driven by creating solutions for people. So I think that's very motivating. I think it's going to help people. By people, I mean you listening. So that's coming too. I have other ideas for free tools to put out that I've been thinking a lot about, and maybe even trying to integrate our free tools with other people's stuff, which I think would be fun. So those are other things that I'm slowly working on. That's what I'm excited about for year 3. Yeah, that's good.
That's
we just started. Oh, we just started. I just started doing grand round episodes too, which are like episodes where I take somebody that I am learning a ton from and I interview them. Which this is not an interview podcast, but like we just did Claire Taylor a couple weeks ago, and then about a little over a month ago, we did another one where we're just talking to people about things that I really respect that they do. I will say Claire is a writer working with writers. Most of the Grand Rounds episodes I have coming up in year 3 are not writers. They're people that do other things that I think is fun. So I'm looking forward to that as well. I mean, we'll connect it to writing. We're not just going to talk about weird, odd things, but I'm bringing them on because I see a deep connection to writing. But well, like Sean, we brought Sean on. Sean's not a novelist, and he writes screenplays. But I know I learned a ton from him talking to him about it. So I'm excited about bringing more people on like that. All right. Anything else? I think we did it.
Happy 2 years. Sorry, Jason's starting to get a little antsy. Gotta send her some tweets.
Thank you for doing this with me for 2 years.
Yeah, thank you for inviting me to it and not saying, okay, well, it was fun to work with you for that amount of time, but I think I'm gonna go ahead by myself. I'm
really excited in year 3 about having this all to myself. Oh, Laura, we can talk about that later. Whatever. Without you here.
You had me there for a second. I was like, wait, what do you mean?
It just being like, I need somebody else to drop the mic so I can point at it. Anyway.
So I can pick it up, talk into it, and then slowly place it back.
And then put it back down and be like, what Laura said. Yeah, anyway. All right, I'm stopping the recording.